Once again, exactly what we discussed in the last update video 2 days ago has happened. Bitcoin came back down to pick up that liquidity at $111,000. We were perfectly prepared. As shown in the last video, our limit order was set at $111,300. So our order was triggered exactly at $111,000. So at this point we are currently in a long position. Of course, happy profits go out to all of you loyal viewers as well. By the way, I didn't just mention this in the last video, but also 3 days ago. In that YouTube video, I showed that I would build up the long position exactly at the Fibonacci golden pocket level, 0.618, 0.65 level at $111,000. So I had already shown it to you there as well. So all of you loyal viewers were perfectly prepared for this entry. Now, of course, the question is what my plan is for the next few days, and in addition, what my overall strategy is, especially for the fourth quarter. For that, I have prepared a very special chart for you today, which actually makes me extremely bullish for the fourth quarter of 2025. So as I said, I have quite a bit prepared for you. We'll take a look at the topic of global liquidity. Of course, we'll also look at what's really happening behind the scenes right now. So we've also received new data on this topic. It's definitely very important to me to show you the current fundamentals here. Otherwise, if you don't want to miss any more videos, especially the update videos, which are extremely important if, like me, you actively trade positions, then feel free to subscribe now so you don't miss any future videos. Otherwise, let's jump straight into the content now. Before we continue with the current video, I just wanted to make sure that you guys know I'm a real person, but every video from my German YouTube channel gets translated in this English channel with AI, just so that you know and you don't wonder. And now I want to make an announcement for you guys. I just created a free Telegram group for only my English speaking community, so only for the people here on my English channel. I created an English speaking Telegram group, so you guys have the opportunity to see all my trades, all my live trades, my technical analysis. Also, you get the opportunity in my Telegram group to use all my trading indicators. So I created in total 3 own trading indicators. One is for liquidity. One indicator is very perfect to predict the bull market or bear market. So it's very useful for this bull run. So just so you know, you get everything completely for free in my Telegram group. You only have to do one thing. You have to sign up with my affiliate link to BingX. Yeah, I personally trade only on BingX. So here you see all my current positions. I also did, by the way, a complete beginner tutorial for my English speaking community for the platform BingX. It's for real a very good crypto exchange with a lot of liquidity, so the trading experience is very good. And with my affiliate link you get also a lot of bonuses, like $120 when you register, $100 for your first deposit. So it's quite a nice opportunity for you guys, for my English speaking community, Crypto Vincent, just so you know. And when you created an account with the link in my description, you have here in your profile your UID, and you just have to send me your UID. I can show you here in the description. So you have to send me your BingX UID to my Telegram at CryptoVincent22, and then I will manually put you in my completely free Telegram group where you get access to all my indicators, live trades, and so on. And you get also insights in my personal trading strategy. So you see here everything. So it's a quite nice opportunity, completely for free. Just sign up with my affiliate link and then I will put you in the group. But now we are continuing with the video you wanted to watch. As I said, our order was triggered perfectly at this point. Just as a quick recap, what happened so that everyone is up to date? As mentioned, we encountered strong resistance here in the yellow box, simply because the Fibonacci golden pocket level is located here. So if we draw from the swing high to the swing low, we can see the 0.618 and 0.65 levels right here. That's why we bounced off here. Then in the last YouTube videos, I pointed out that the next important support comes in at $111,300. On one hand, our Fibonacci golden pocket level is located here. On the other hand, as you can see from my own indicator, the Vincent liquidity profile, there was a significant volume spike here. This means we can assume that this area is extremely fiercely contested, and that's why support came in here relatively quickly. That's why it was purely a market maker's move that briefly came in, and this is also noticeable here on the 2-week basis using the liquidity heat map. At this point, we saw some liquidity come in at $111,300. That's why there was definitely a likelihood that the market makers would take advantage of such a move again. And that's exactly what happened. That's why my order was definitely triggered. Why I am now actually, and this brings us to the new analysis, why I am now extremely bullish and truly believe that the bottom is in for Bitcoin. We're going to take a look at all of this now on the 1 hour chart. I'll also remove the Fibonacci level here. I'll also hide my own indicator at this point. As I said, each of you has completely free access to this indicator, and as mentioned, it's an absolute weapon for identifying individual support and resistance levels, because you can see exactly where a bounce might occur. So now you know about that as well. I've linked everything in the video description. Now, let's take a look here at what's happening on the 1 hour time frame so we can analyze everything better. Here we can also quickly bring up an RSI, or if you prefer, my own indicator, KVBSO. As I said, everything is linked. And what we can observe very clearly here is, on the one hand, the current weakness in the Bitcoin price, where basically one new low after another has been formed. This is evident here from the individual downward spikes, showing that there is a clear downtrend. We're also seeing some slight resistance coming in here again. But if we take a look at the whole thing now, both in the RSI and in my own indicator, we definitely have a bullish divergence here. So we have a declining chart, but at the same time, in the RSI and in my own indicator, there is relative strength present at the moment. We can even see in the KVBSO that we are slowly but surely moving back into the yellow cloud, which definitely indicates that we can expect a stronger trend again in the next few hours, in the next few days. And that's why I personally also believe that the current spike we've just seen, which ultimately triggered our order, was most likely the bottom, or at most, we might see one more spike like this. Because, as I said, you can usually assume that when a bullish divergence occurs, sooner or later the resistance levels will be broken to the upside, and we can then also expect that the previous levels, basically the origin, will be reached again fairly quickly at 115,000 US dollars. That is definitely my next immediate price target, and that's why I will clearly let this long position run or even compound it, in other words, scale it up if Bitcoin should reach a new low again. And that's why I've placed another limit order here at 110,300 US dollars. So if Bitcoin does something like that again, for whatever reason, then I'm prepared here as well, and my long position will simply get even bigger at that point. So currently, I haven't moved my stop loss into profit yet. Of course, I'll keep you updated in my free Telegram group about what this position is doing, but as I said, right now, I'm definitely feeling positive and bullish. We'll talk about the bigger picture in just a moment. But first, I want to take a quick look behind the scenes, what's currently happening on-chain, technically speaking. And here we've also received new data, especially from the so-called weak hands, meaning particularly the short-term investors. And what we can observe quite clearly is simply the recent sell-off that has taken place and the current panic that is spreading throughout the market. If we take a look at the Fear and Greed Index, we have a score of 39. We have now officially dipped back into the fear zone, and this is quite easy to explain based on on-chain data. We can see very clearly that short-term investors, in other words, the general public or however you want to call them, basically investors who are relatively new to the market and usually with relatively small amounts, have accordingly sent some of their coins to exchanges in the past few hours in order to realize their losses. And this is also noticeable when looking at the cost basis of short-term holders. So, what is essentially the average value for short-term investors? And you can observe this here, represented by the red line. This means that whenever we enter this area, $19,500 is exactly the break-even value for short-term investors. As long as we stay above this level, everything is fine. If we ever fall below $19,000 again, it's quite possible that panic will spread once more, because then the broad masses, that is, the short-term investors, will see the average value drop below $19,000. As a result, the majority would be back in the red, and that could once again lead to even lower values on the Fear and Greed Index. Nevertheless, personally, I am definitely feeling more than positive at the moment, because as long as it's just the general public, that is, mainly the short-term investors, who are selling and panic is spreading, and as long as the big players, the major institutions, or the big whales aren't starting to buy in, then I personally remain relatively relaxed. And that's really the most important message I always try to convey in my YouTube videos. Yes, you can also take a short position in the short term or something like that, but for me personally, it's extremely important to present rational analyses here, so that you don't end up being one of those investors who get shaken out now, who sell out of panic, even though right now, and that's exactly why I titled today's video the way I did, even though right now the most important phase in the crypto market is beginning. And this is also the perfect segue to this chart that I have prepared for you today. What we can see here is Bitcoin on a weekly basis, and here I've marked the end of September each time with the orange vertical lines. So this is basically dependent on the current time period. The end of September is always the orange line. September 28th, September 27th. So basically here on a weekly basis I used the last weekly candle of September, and what we can see very clearly here is that up to now, every September during a Bitcoin bull market, of course there's also a September here right in the middle of the bear market, but in my opinion that one is invalid. Here, at this point, we have a 100% reference value that up to now, every September was either negative or just super slow, yes, super consolidating. That's why at this point I drew this orange box in front of the vertical bars, and what we can see quite clearly there is that every September was super boring. It was practically like a kind of spring being compressed at that point. Once here in 2020, then we can see it quite clearly here, 2023, also 2024, now again as well. Even though the current September is slightly green, if we take a look here with 3.9%, we have to keep one thing very clear in mind. The current September is super sluggish, super boring, but as I said, that's extremely typical for Bitcoin because September is the last month before the fourth quarter, and it's very typical for the spring to be compressed one more time, for all the short-term or weak hands to be shaken out before the big upward movement happens. And that's why I am actually, and this is not an exaggeration or anything like that, and I don't want to create any FOMO here, but I am truly, honestly, more bullish than ever when it comes to the year 2025. Now, the hot phase is really officially starting in the next 1 to, let's say, at most 3 weeks. Of course, things could still be a bit sluggish at the beginning of October, but I really believe that now is when the final push is happening, both for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the altcoins. And that's why it definitely makes sense to prepare yourself properly now, because as I said, we have relatively clear reference points from the past. We've seen it in the last cycle, plus 486% for Bitcoin, then another push after September with plus 62%, plus 172% in this case at the end of 2023, and then also here in 2024, plus 76%. In general, the fourth quarter is always the decisive one, not just for crypto, but also in e-commerce, that is online retail or in the stock market. The fourth quarter is always the strongest and best quarter, and that's why, at this point, time and data are clearly on our side. We're now getting a tailwind accordingly, also generally from the stock market. We can take a quick look at the S&P 500, which is currently showing an absolutely incredible performance. Here we see it on a weekly basis, and we can also take a look at it on a 3-day basis. And here we can also clearly see in the traditional market that one all-time high after another is being reached, and of course that also gives a boost to the crypto market. Currently we are seeing a slight decoupling, so at the moment Bitcoin is lagging compared to the traditional market. But in my opinion it's only a matter of time here as well. Just like with global liquidity, we're also getting a tailwind again. Yes, at this point we also have to be very clear and admit to ourselves, the current correlation between M2 money supply and the Bitcoin price can no longer really be maintained. So in the meantime, we are seeing a clear decoupling here. Nevertheless, the rule still applies. Fresh liquidity is the fuel for rising prices. The liquidity has to go somewhere. And of course, maybe right now we're seeing it a bit more strongly in the traditional market. Maybe the S&P 500 is currently benefiting disproportionately, but sooner or later, fresh liquidity will flow back into Bitcoin as well. That's why I'm convinced it's only a matter of time before Bitcoin catches up with this jump in global liquidity again. And here too, we're currently seeing relatively good data. We can also clearly see here that the upward trend is still intact. In the short term, we've seen a bit of a bounce here, or some liquidity has been withdrawn, but as long as, on a larger scale, everything remains in place and fresh liquidity continues to flow into the markets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the altcoins will benefit accordingly. That's why, and I want to make this very clear in today's YouTube video, at the moment there is absolutely no reason to worry. You just need to stay completely relaxed about it. I've already seen some comments, and I see comments on other YouTubers' channels as well, saying that we're heading into a bear market or something like that. I really have to ask, what exactly is the reasoning behind that? Why should we be heading into a bear market or anything like that right before the strongest quarter of the entire year? That would be completely untypical and definitely wouldn't fit the overall cycle at all. And in general, we can see it in the traditional markets. No matter what factor it is, whether it's global liquidity, the traditional market, Fed decisions, whatever, we're currently getting tailwinds. And that, in turn, is benefiting the crypto market as well. Also, just as a quick tip, something each of you can add to your own chart is the 50-week EMA. So far, this has anticipated every Bitcoin and crypto cycle, so to speak, indicating when the bull market is officially over. We've seen it here, once in 2020 and 2021, and also here in the last cycle. As soon as this line is crossed below with 2 weekly candles, you can assume that the bear market has begun, and right now, the 50-week EMA is exactly at 97,000 US dollars. Given the current Bitcoin price, you can also assume that this is what happens, that this is essentially the current support beneath us. Therefore, even if something like that happens again, it still doesn't mean the bear market has started or anything like that. We just have to keep a very close eye on this EMA to make sure that nothing like that happens and we don't get rejected there, because then things would really look extremely grim, but at the moment, we're still far from that. And as long as Bitcoin does exactly what it needs to do, and I've already talked about this in other YouTube videos, for example here 3 weeks ago, where I showed you this pattern with the individual liquidity flushes that kept happening. A new high point, a stair-step upward movement, then a liquidity flush to shake everyone out again. That's exactly what's happening again right now. And that's exactly what has happened accordingly. 170,000 US dollars was therefore the bottom. We also saw it during the summer slump of 2024. This liquidity flush happened here as well. Back then, it was also due to geopolitical events, and afterwards, the origin in the grey box was retested again. And what a surprise! What are we seeing at the current moment? We're seeing the liquidity flush, which happened exactly the same way during the summer slump of 2024. And now, at the current moment, we're also seeing the retest of the grey box. The gray box represents the origin of the movement, so at this point we can clearly observe a similar behavior as back then. And that's why, as long as Bitcoin is doing exactly what it needs to do in its normal pattern, in its usual course, I'm extremely relaxed. Yes, in my opinion, it's absolutely justified to go into a complete panic if something like that happens. If Bitcoin were to crash back down below 100,000 US dollars, then I would honestly start to worry myself, and at that point, I would also communicate with you very transparently. Hey guys, I'm really worried. It's very possible that the bull market is over, or something like that. So I would be completely honest with you at that point, I can guarantee you that. But as long as these data and these scenarios haven't happened yet, why should I even start to worry or panic like all the other investors? So you really have to be extremely careful to have a clear plan and to stick to that plan. And that's exactly why it's so incredibly important that I record all these YouTube videos for you, so you stay up to date and get a little mental boost from me each time so that you can hang in there for the most important quarter of the entire year. It was definitely extremely important to me to mention all of this again. Otherwise, as I said, I will definitely keep you updated in my free Telegram group regarding the current trade. As I said, it doesn't have to be the case that this is the ultimate bottom. In that case, I will of course keep you updated on where I might be making new long entries. Still, all in all, I am feeling very bullish. The individual indicators are already giving fairly clear signs that the next move is more likely to be upwards than downwards. We can also see it very clearly. All the liquidity below us has been cleared out. That's why here we definitely have the data and the liquidity on our side. That's all for now on that topic. Otherwise, I would like to sincerely thank you for your attention. I've linked everything in the video description, whether it's my free Telegram group or all the links to the exchanges. Bitpanda is linked, BingX is linked, so you're definitely informed about that as well. Or when it comes to trading bots, as I said, I personally use BingX. You'll find all the information you need in the video description. Otherwise, make sure to tune in again for the next update video so you stay up to date. And apart from that, I'd say we'll see each other again in the next video.